Today is another Adaptable Zone series video, and I would like to discuss how much intensity you should be doing based on what zone you are in. Let's get cracking. Learning how much volume you should be doing in a specific intensity is extremely crucial to training. We've already talked about various ways that you can be in an adaptable zone based on weight training, using heart rate as well to monitor your overtraining and when you should be doing intensity. But today I'd want to give volume-specific amounts for you to complete in a set interval session or a complete ride so that you are able to get the maximum out of your own specific physiology and maximize the benefits of your training without overdoing it. I should say that the traditional 7-zone model, commonly used by many athletes, Training Peaks, Trainer Road, etc., while it is great, people who study exercise physiology only use a 3-zone model. This includes the first zone, which is a moderate intensity. This includes your active recovery in zone 2 work. Next is your heavy domain. This is the domain when you start feeling each pedal stroke. This would include tempo, sweet spot, and threshold zones. And then lastly, in the severe domain, this is where we see the clock is really ticking on how long you can maintain this zone. This includes part of threshold, VO2 max, anaerobic, and part of neuromuscular zones. So starting with the first physiological zone, this includes active recovery and zone 2 endurance. This is the zone where we have a lot of fat oxidation. This is the zone where we have a lot of max performance gains actually associated with the volume. And this is where we can also build up a lot of training stress without inducing a lot of physiological stress. So it's a really great zone. So a lot of people who facilitate or are big proponents of the polarized method say do a lot of zone 2 training, and I 100% agree with them, as volume endurance training is highly correlated with endurance performance. In this zone, I would recommend anywhere from 1 to 7 hours of work. If you are on the shorter end, let's say 30, 45, or 1 hour, I would say aim for the top of zone 1. This is typically 70 to 75% threshold. However, if you're doing longer rides, say 3, 4, 7, 8, 9 hours, being in zone 1 is totally okay. However, as a coach, I do recommend athletes to be at least 60% of maximum heart rate when performing, as that is shown to give the maximum benefits without doing junk miles. The next zone that I want to get into is the middle physiological zone, zone 2 physiologically, also known as zone 3 and 4 in the traditional 7-zone model. This includes tempo, sweet spot, and threshold. For each of these zones, this is a slightly more physiological straining zone, and you don't want to do too much. However, it is still really good for building muscle-related enzyme and efficiency adaptations. Spending a lot of time here during base or build is a really good idea to make sure that you're able to get the most out of your muscles and prevent any cramping, muscular fatigue, or that feeling of lactic acid all over the place. For these specific zones and tempo, I recommend anywhere from 30 minutes, probably to 5 to 6 hours. I've seen the highest, but no more than your race distance for tempo. For sweet spot, the same goes. It's just a slightly higher tempo. Once you've accomplished more tempo-related gains, hitting a little bit more sweet spot and hitting race time, I should say, or 30 minutes just short of it. If you're unable to do that, get as much as you can in. I generally work my athletes up to about 60 to 90 minutes, and we've had a lot of success with that. Finally, threshold. Threshold is the power that you can sustain for anywhere from 30 to 70 minutes. A lot of people like to say they have one specific threshold power. I prefer to use threshold as more of a general zone term. That is 95 to 105%. There's a lot of different definitions of threshold, which I will cover in a completely different video, but you will be covering 2 different powers between 30 minutes and 70 minutes, and the range between those 2 powers essentially is your threshold. I would prefer most athletes to actually stay on the low side of threshold. As I've seen, the closer you can stay to 4 millimolars of lactate, true physiological steady state threshold, that's where you're going to make more enzymatic gains, even if it means being on the slightly lower towards sweet spot. So whatever your power is for 70 minutes, I would suggest hitting that at and doing intervals there, preferably over the interval power that you would be doing at 30 minutes. There is a place for that 30-minute power range. However, during a build phase, it's less important than the little bit lower, longer duration power, and becomes more important during our VO2 super threshold and anaerobic phase. So the third physiological zone, also known as the severe domain, is where our body really starts going less aerobic and very, very anaerobic. This is where the clock begins ticking on how long you can perform this kind of effort. These are generally efforts anywhere from 5 seconds out to roughly 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes. Any more and you start getting a little bit more aerobic. And generally you would want to be keeping and staying under that red line for those longer efforts until you get within 3, 4, 5 minutes of finishing that effort. However, this zone includes upper threshold, the VO2 max zone, anaerobic zone, and neuromuscular zone. For VO2 max, I recommend 15 minutes of VO2 max work at least once a week, generally in the form of 4x4 minute intervals. A prominent exercise physiologist named Jan Hellegrud was very, very prominent of only doing 4x4s. We now realize that wasn't exactly the best, but it made for a really good, really simple workout with 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, 4 times. And it got you to 15, 16 minutes in this case, and allows you to actually get your heart rate pegged, as where a 2-minute effort or a 3-minute effort might not enable you to hit that mark. If you're able to push to 5 minutes or 6 minutes and only do 3 intervals, you'll get the same benefits. In fact, it might even be better for that longer term power. Right above the VO2 max zone, we have the anaerobic zone. This is where glycolysis is in full action. This is the zone that I would recommend doing sprint intervals in. It is generally about 120% to 150% of threshold. And then after that zone is the neuromuscular zone. I would strongly recommend staying out of the anaerobic zone as much as possible and not doing it for any more than 3 to maybe an 8-second sprint. Repeated 5 to 10 times maybe, but I generally only do about 3 to 5 myself. Staying below the neuromuscular zone is really key to endurance performance as we start going above 150% threshold or 130% VO2 max power. We start getting de-innervation of our type 2 fibers, reduced aerobic endurance performance, and reduced muscular enzymatic action. So that just about sums up this video. Please comment down below what your favorite interval is, how much you like to do, and look for more videos in the future from Freebird Endurance. Subscribe, like, comment, and lastly, be your own scientist. Forgot how to do math. Oh, I might throw up on that one.